Let's get into some climate change news. I feel like I'm a little too hyped up on a Sunday morning. Let's see. Right, right. Okay, let's get into some climate change news. This is all very interesting, but I wanna. I'm losing my time. So this is from We Don't Have Time. Speaking about losing my time, flooding and heavy rain in South Korea, at least 5 dead. And this is actually from a week ago. I had I was not aware of heavy intense flooding in South Korea, but it makes sense because the entirety of Asia is just being slammed slammed by intense rain. This is from Busan, South Korea. Um, anyways, just wanted to show you that. And I want to show you this from Zach Labe. This is actually his pinned tweet. This is at the top of his Twitter account. But a look at the loss of thicker, usually older Arctic sea ice in October. So this ends at 2016. This is 4 years ago. I don't know if I've shown you guys this before or not. 4 years ago, look how small, how little thick ice we had. I wonder what this would, I would really love to see this graph all the way to 2020. Or maybe I wouldn't want to see it. Maybe maybe that's the last thing I want to see. Um, so let's get into the story that's been kind of pretty ubiquitous for the last couple hours. I'm seeing this everywhere. Um, this is from yesterday from The Guardian. India plans to fell ancient forests to create 40 new coal fields. And again, this is the fits in with the mantra of progress over planet. Narendra Modi's dream of a self-reliant India comes at a terrible price for its indigenous population. Give me one sec. Um, Over the past decade, Umeshwar Singh Amra has witnessed his homeland descend into a battleground. The war is being waged in Hasdeo Arand, a rich and biodiverse Indian forest, has pitted indigenous people, ancient trees, elephants, and sloths against the might of bulldozers, trucks, and hydraulic jacks, fighting with a single purpose: the extraction of coal. Yet, under a new self-reliant India plan, doesn't this sound like? Remember when Obama was going to ramp up fracking so that the U.S. could be energy self-reliant or energy independent? Sounds kind of like that language. Narendra Modi to boost the economy post COVID-19 and reduce costly imports. 40 new coal fields in some of India's most ecologically sensitive forests are to be opened up for commercial mining. Among them are four huge blocks of Hasdeo Arand's 420,000 acres of forest in the central Indian state of Chhattisgarh, which sit above an estimated 5 billion tons of coal. It marks a significant shift. The coal industry in India is state-owned, but this auction of 40 new coal blocks will see the creation of a privatized commercial coal sector in India. Among those bidding for it are India's rich and powerful industrial giants, including the $14 billion Adani Group, run by the Indian billionaire Gautam Adani, who operates India's largest coal power plants and has close ties to Modi. The coal auction has already proved controversial at both the local and political level. At least 7 of the coal blocks up for auction were previously deemed no-go areas for mining due to their environmentally valuable status, and about 80% of the blocks are home to indigenous communities and thick forest cover. 4 state governments, West Bengal, Maharashtra, thank you, to my brain, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, have written to Modi in opposition of raised legal objections to the auction, and one coal block, which overlapped with the Tadoba Tiger Reserve in Maharashtra, has already been removed. Amra, who is an Adivasi, a term used to describe India's indigenous people, was one of the 9 local Sarpanchs, village leaders, who recently wrote to Modi demanding a stop to the auction. In Hasdeo, Iran, he said, if the government gave me the option to give up my life in exchange for no more mining happening in the forest, I would do it in a second. Amra has seen firsthand the environmental devastation wreaked by open-cast coal mines. In 2011, 2 vast open-cast mines were excavated on the forest peripheries, ripping up the fragile land and filling the surroundings with pollution, smoke, heat, noise, and poison. Crime rose drastically in the area, and the elephants that lived in the forest, disoriented by the new hostile conditions, became aggressive, leading to dozens of deaths. The prospect of more significant blocks of the forest, the largest in India, being handed over to private mining operations was more than Amra could bear. 5 villages will be destroyed and more than 6,000 mainly indigenous people displaced, as well as thousands of hectares of trees torn down for mines and roads. If more mining happens, everything will change. The natural resources will be gone. Our way of life will disappear. Everything will be under threat, he said. We are a tribal people. We cannot go out and live in the cities, and no amount of money can ever compensate us. There is no forest like this in the world. Cut it down, it can never be replaced. Wow, how's that for some altruism? You cannot replace the forest. No amount of money. There's no amount of money that can replace this forest. If more mining happens, everything will change. The natural resources will be gone. Our way of life will disappear. Everything will be under threat. He said, we are a tribal people. We cannot go out and live. I already read this. While across the world, governments have geared towards a green recovery, quote unquote, post-COVID-19, the United Nations Secretary, have they really geared towards a green recovery? I feel like this is a really nice sounding words and a really good idea that people want to believe is happening, but is this happening worldwide? I don't know about that. I feel like a few countries in Europe might be doing this. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said recently there was no good reason for any country to include coal in recovery plans. India is putting fossil fuel at the forefront of its strategy to turn the pandemic into economic opportunity. Because they can, yet with its 45% ash content, making it some of the most polluting coal in the world, there is unlikely to be an international market for Indian coal. In addition, many major factories in India cannot run on dirty domestic coal, meaning they will still need to import it from abroad. Holy crap. There's also a question of necessity. While India is the world's second largest consumer of coal and annually imports 247 million tons, costing more than $20 billion, India's electricity demand is forecast to fall by up to 15% over the next 5 years due to economic reverberations of COVID-19. Meanwhile, a report this week by Center for Research of Energy and Clean Air concluded that the current state-run coal mines of India already have capacity to produce 20% more coal than the expected demand in 2030. So that's very interesting. They're going to mine up this coal even though they have more than enough. They want to sell it. They want to use it. They want to burn it. Whatever it is smells like money. Smells like money and death. Very disheartening indeed. Of course, that's happening all over the planet. So, different day, same story. Kendra E. Moyer, talk about old school, indeed. Yeah. John Ziggy Kelleher, they will be killed like the Amazon, of course. Andy the Gardener, read this earlier. Why can the neoliberalists pushing green energy that are against coal stop this plan? It's almost like they are secretly for it. Because maybe they don't really care. They really don't care. They're more about the economy, right? So, green energy is like marketing, like a big marketing plan, or the idea of greening up the economy is, what was I was just reading something yesterday about Warren Buffett. I build windmills because I get a tax incentive or tax write-off, right? And it probably looks good on my portfolio, or makes me look like I care, right? I'm not saying that all of the green energy industry is all about that, but I would have to say I think that a lot of governments are saying, this. It's like saying Black Lives Matter, right? It's like, we love green energy, Green New Deal. Yeah, it's a climate emergency. We really care. It's all public relations. It's all like, yeah, look what we're doing for the environment. But they really don't really care about the environment. And they really are more worried about profit margins and income and making sure that everything runs the way that it's always going to run, right? So, that statement about the rest of the world is trying to have a green recovery from COVID-19, all of that is public relations, completely. All of that is just people saying, like, we really care. Meanwhile, they don't really care. Anthony Davis, I thought green energy simply means cut down trees and burn them for power. Coal is still clearly a cabal. Yeah, definitely. Sorry. It's weird. Weird sounds in my garage. I'm hearing things. I'm hearing stuff, guys. They're coming for me. Grateful Dan, what's going on? Buffett has joined the buy back your own stock crowd. Things must be bad. Yeah, well, let's hope. Let's hope. Bold Rope Lamppost, coal will outlast nuclear and electricity? I don't know. Maybe. Kendra Moyer says there's an element that wants society to remain stratified because renewable energy equalizes the lives of the poor. Sure. Of course, that's what's happening. Let me. One more article I want to read. I don't know if I'm going to read the whole thing. Well, maybe I don't. Hold on. I'm always running overtime these days, guys. I can never seem to keep it under an hour, but. Anyways, in tackling the global climate crisis, I'm reading this for maybe possibly comedic relief. Who knows? Tackling the global climate crisis, doom and optimism are both dangerous traps. And I would actually have to agree with that, like that very broad statement of the headline. But let's get into this. Overheated polemics won't solve this emergency, and the apocalypse is a needlessly high bar for action. Okay. Um, Protesters march in the streets in an extinction rebellion against the climate crisis. I see where this is going already. With some, but not all, of their leaders claiming that climate tipping points could kill billions in the coming decades. Others dismiss the importance of a reality of the crisis, while new books loudly proclaim apocalypse never and false alarm. The popular discourse around the climate emergency all too often highlights fringe voices that predict the end of the world or suggest that there is little to worry about. But as climatologist Stephen Schneider presently remarked a decade ago, when it comes to the climate, the end of the world and good for us are probably the two least likely outcomes. I don't know. I'd have to say the end of the world is probably the more likely outcome than good for us, but that's just me. The environmental crisis is one of the most serious and pressing issues facing the world today. We are already living with impacts of human-caused global heating, and the world is not doing nearly enough yet to put us on a pathway to avoiding potentially dire impacts later in the century to both humans and the natural world. But a discourse sharply divided between doom and dismissal risks obstructing climate action. Does it really? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe somewhat true. Who knows? Rather than motivating it, climate impacts are often framed as an issue of thresholds. We must limit warming to below certain specific numbers beyond which there are dragons. However, the science suggests that climate crisis is really an issue of degree. There is no magic line that we know of beyond which things suddenly transition from manageable to catastrophic. Rather, the damage becomes worse the more warming that occurs, often exponentially so. The problem is, I think this person is leaving out the idea of tipping points or feedback loops. When we try to project how the climate might change in the future, we confront three big uncertainties: how much greenhouse gases humans will emit. Here's a certainty: how much have we already emitted? How the accumulation of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere might change as a result. C number one, and how sensitive atmospheric temperatures are to this. On the first of these, we have some reason for modest optimism. Do we? The world has made progress on slowing the rise in emissions over the past decade. Hold on. Slowing the rise? We haven't slowed the rise because they're still rising. So I don't know. Are they rising at a less rate? Maybe. Sure. They're still rising. Global carbon dioxide emissions have still been rising. They just said what I said, but only at half the rate they were in the 2000s. I guess that's good. I'm not trying to be shitty. That is good on a degree. Use of coal, the most CO2 intensive fossil fuel, peaked in 2013 and has been declining since. False. The use of coal has doubled in the last 10 years. Just not in the West, but in the East. We have succeeded in making clean energy cheaper, and low carbon sources now provide more energy than coal worldwide. Nightmare scenarios where global emissions triple by the end of the century now seem far less likely as we see them near a plateau. Possible. At the same time, there is an ever-growing gap between where we are today and the emissions reductions needed to limit warming to globally agreed upon targets. Right. CO2 accumulates in the atmosphere over time, so reducing emissions does not stop the world from warming. To stop global temperatures from rising, our emissions need to go all the way down to zero. The news on climate sensitivity is more mixed. Scientists have long struggled, whichever you want, to pin down exactly how much the Earth will warm if the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere were to double, and have had some recent success on that front. The bad news is that we can effectively rule out low levels of warming. So we can effectively rule, So we can no longer trust to luck and hope that we can still let CO2 build up and warming will be small. The slightly better news is that very high levels of warming also seem less likely than previously thought, but this is a less certain result. Feedbacks may also be important today. About half of our CO2 emissions are absorbed by the oceans and land vegetation, but this could weaken as oceans become warmer and as drier soils, more frequent fires and thawing permafrost result in more CO2 being released. Many of these processes are included in our climate models, but it is still unclear how fast these changes will occur and what the overall effect on the buildup of CO2 in the atmosphere will be. Current policies adopted by countries put us on track for very roughly around 3C, planetary heating, by the end of the century. Yeah, so if you're trying to dissuade people from doom, 3C is done. 3C is planet with humans being over. If not, all other animals too. Or most other animals. 3C is done. Son. But heating could well be substantially higher or lower than this best estimate. Also, these global average numbers are not the full picture. Land regions where we all live will heat around a third faster than the planet as a whole, and the polar regions faster still. Uncertainty is not our friend because expected damages increase faster the hotter it gets. We stand a real risk of catastrophic impacts if we end up with an unlucky combination of highly sensitive climate and faster accumulation of CO2. So why not act like that's what we're going to get? You should act as if the worst case scenario is the one that will be. We will also have fewer options to stop or reverse this by the time it happens. Those uncertainties are why it's all the more important to control the one thing we can, our future emissions. Humans are remarkably adaptable. Using technology to live comfortably in some of our planet's most extreme environments, it's very unlikely that global heating, at least by itself, could pose an existential risk to our species. Okie dokie. Very unlikely. I find this, okay, I'm having problems with this article. Some of the things are reasonable and other things are very unreasonable, but whatever. At the same time, our ability to adapt rapidly to changes in our environment depends in part on access to technology and the resources to adopt it. How about, and the resources that power that technology? As in fossil fuels. The climate crisis is better thought of as an existential risk multiplier in a world characterized by extreme poverty and inequality, conflict, and weak institutions. It could help push some societies over the brink. The severity of climate impacts depends not just on our emissions, but on how well we tackle political challenges. We also need to acknowledge that the natural world largely lacks our adaptive capacity. The climate crisis is already wreaking havoc on fragile ecosystems such as coral reefs. Unmitigated, it could drive many of the world's species to extinction as they are unable to survive changing temperatures. Deforestation, pollution, and other environmentally damaging activities make the natural world more vulnerable to disruptions from climate change. Addressing them can help make nature more resilient. This crisis will not be solved quickly or easily, and overheated polemics are not helping. While it won't be good for us, it also won't be the literal end of the world. Well, at least not while you're alive. But, can you speak that for your children or the other generations of people? The apocalypse is a needlessly high bar to take action. Though most of the challenges, well, yeah, it is a high bar to take action. However, we've put off action for a really long time, now putting us much more closer to the apocalypse. So how close do we need to get for action? Though most of the challenges we overcome as a species are not existential risks, they are nonetheless critically important. Well, this is all very feel good and fine. This actually makes me feel a whole lot better. Thank you, Zeke Hossfather. We see a real risk that dwelling on doom may serve to obstruct climate action rather than motivating it, promoting fatalism and further polar. I don't know. I don't see that at all. I see a lot of people taking action. I see a lot of people very concerned about this. I see a lot more people speaking on this. I see a lot more people out in the streets talking about this. I see people raising awareness of this. That's taking action, right? And I think a lot of people are aware of the doom. I'm aware of the doom. Are you aware of the doom? I'm pretty aware of the doom. Promoting fatalism and further polarization. There's also evidence that fear is not a very effective tool to engage people around the climate. Perhaps, perhaps not. But dismissing the severity of climate impacts and the real possibility of worst-case outcomes is also an extremely dangerous gamble. The risks are serious enough, and we need a common understanding of the urgent need to tackle them. Okay. I don't know. Did you all get anything out of that? I don't want to be really super negative, but I found that to be on a scale of whatever, about a 7. Irk 1, need more soldiers for wildlife. Yeah. Hey guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and you can support the channel. The links below, PayPal, Patreon, Square. Also, if you'd like to watch the live streams, you can watch the live streams on my Patreon channel. You can subscribe for as little as $1. So hopefully I will see you over there, and thanks so much.